The scratching noise. Kevin lived in a small apartment downtown. The walls were fairly thin, so he was used to hearing his neighbors sometimes. One night, he heard an unfamiliar sound. It was like a scraping in the walls. He figured it was the new neighbors and gave them a break. The noise went away after a few minutes, and he was able to go to sleep. The next day, he walked past them in the hallway. They had a nice chat. He learned they just finished moving in yesterday, so he was right. They were the cause of the sound. They talked a little more before he had to get to work. Everything went back to normal for about a week. Then, at the same time as before, the sound happened again. It was soft at first, then grew into a repetitive scratching noise, almost like someone was doing a long, scraping motion against the walls. It was loud enough that it woke him up. He went to bang his fist on the wall to tell whoever it was to stop. Before he could even bring his fist down, the sound disappeared. He flopped his arm down and shrugged it off. In the morning, he went to get dressed but noticed something. His closet door was cracked open. He thought he closed it the night before. Cautiously, he opened it. There was nothing different about it. Everything looked exactly the same. He laughed it off and got dressed. After that, things were normal for 2 weeks. One night, he came home drunk and went straight to bed. He had a dream. It was dark, but he felt hot. There was sweat dripping down his face. His arms and legs felt like they were restrained. He started to panic as the scraping sound returned. It filled his ears until it was the only thing he could hear. Kevin shot out of bed. Sunlight was coming in through the window. He realized it was just a dream and took a shaky breath. Then, he looked over and saw his closet door was wide open. He always closed his closet door and remembered back to the one day where it was slightly open. He let it go at the time because sometimes it just doesn't latch. This time, there was no reason for the door to be open that wide. Then he remembered he was drunk last night, so maybe he opened it and just blacked out. He wasn't wearing any different clothes than the day before, though. He was a little shaken, but decided to forget about it. He got up to close the door and nurse his hangover. 1 month passed before there was another incident. It was pitch black in Kevin's bedroom, and he was dead asleep. The scratching noise started one more time, but it didn't wake him up. It lasted a few minutes and then slowly faded away. Then, the doorknob to his closet twisted open. A thin beam of light shone into his room. It widened as the door opened. A shadow, in the shape of a person, stood centered in the light. Kevin shifted in his sleep. His eyes began to flutter open as the shadow walked towards him. Before he could react, he was hit on the head. The first thing he felt, before he even opened his eyes, was heat. It was dark, but he could make out vague shapes. It seemed like he was in a very small space. He tried to move, but realized his arms and legs were tied down. Then he heard something. It sounded like someone was walking towards him. Suddenly, a light turned on. It blinded him for a second, even though it was just a small lamp. The first thing he saw was wall slats. He was inside the walls of his apartment building. Something was in his closet. He also noticed strange words and symbols carved all over the walls. Was that the reason for the scratching noise? He squinted at the walls as his eyes adjusted to the light. The shadow stepped out in front of him. It was his new neighbor. Kevin's jaw dropped. He couldn't believe what was going on. The neighbor laughed at his expression. "I'm not who you think I am." Its face began to twist and bend. Its body contorted, changing size and shape. When it stood up straight again, Kevin was looking at himself. "I am a shapeshifter. I ate your neighbor and took their shape. And now you're next." Before he could scream, the shapeshifter gagged him, uttered, "I'll be back," and walked towards the hole in his closet.